SingleDad waits outside in the rain. The woman who invites him in changes everything. Ben Carter moved quickly through the dim school hallway, mop slapping against the floor. Another spill, another delay. His shift should have ended 15 minutes ago, but life never seemed to care about clocks when you were a single dad trying to keep everything together. Outside, rain pounded the windows. Hard. He glanced at the wall clock. 6:17 p.m. He was late again. Ben ripped off his gloves, shoved everything into the janitor's closet, and burst out the back door into the downpour. His hoodie did nothing to stop the cold water that soaked him within seconds. He ran past shuttered shops, puddles deep enough to swallow his shoes, and flickering streetlights, straight to Sweet Blossom Bakery. He didn't step inside. Through the foggy glass, he saw her. Lily, his daughter, her tiny figure tucked into the bakery booth, coloring patiently, her pink backpack beside her, her feet swinging. She was waiting, like always. The door opened. Ben Rosa, the bakery owner, blinked. "You're drenched," he offered a breathless smile. "Science lab accident. Spill took longer to clean." "She's fine. She's been asking about you, though." Lily spotted him and dashed to the door. "Daddy!" He dropped to his knees, arms wide. She hugged him tight, uncaring that he was soaked. "You're late," she said, giggling, "but I still saved room for cake I didn't forget." He pulled out a slightly damp cake box from his pocket. Triple chocolate. Her eyes sparkled. The best kind. Rosa handed him a towel and whispered, "Next time, come in. You don't always have to wait in the rain." He nodded, grateful but quiet. Later, as they stepped back outside into the storm, Lily held his hand and looked up at the sky. "I like the rain," she said. "It makes everything shine." Ben looked down at her, his whole world in one sentence. "You're right," he murmured. "It really does." Rain still poured as Ben knelt to adjust Lily's too short rain boots. His own clothes clung to him like a second skin. Cold, heavy, worn. "Daddy, your hands are freezing," Lily said, concern in her eyes. Before Ben could respond, a soft voice cut through the storm. "Excuse me, would you like to come inside?" He turned. A woman stood a few feet away holding a large umbrella. Her coat was tailored, her scarf neatly tucked in place, and her calm presence somehow cut through the rain. She looked like someone who belonged on the cover of a magazine, not on a rainy street corner, talking to a soaked janitor and his daughter. Ben stood slowly, unsure. "You wear fine. Just heading home." She glanced at Lily. "She's shivering." Ben hesitated. She stepped closer, offering the umbrella over Lily. "There's a calf just around the corner." "It's warm. I was heading there. You're welcome to join me, just until the rain lets up." Lily looked up at her, then at Ben. "Can we, Daddy?" "Just a little," Ben finally nodded. "Okay. Thank you." The woman smiled just slightly. She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask for his name either. She simply led the way, matching her stride to Lily's little feet holding the umbrella, so all three could walk beneath it. And for the first time that day, Ben didn't feel like he was carrying the world alone. The glass doors whispered open, and Ben stepped inside, then stopped. Warmth hit him like a wave. So did the sight. Crystal lights, velvet chairs, people in gowns and tuxedos mingling beneath towering floral arrangements. A string quartet played near the back. This wasn't a calf, it was a private gala. Ben instinctively pulled Lily closer. "We shouldn't be here." But the woman didn't pause. She turned back and said gently, "This way. You're not intruding." Ben followed, every muscle tense. He felt out of place, wet boots squeaking on marble shirt, still damp. But Lily let out a little sigh of wonder, staring wide-eyed at the glowing room. They sat at a quiet corner table near a fireplace. Moments later, the woman returned with 2 steaming mugs and a small plate of treats. "Hot cocoa," she said, "with marshmallows, and chamomile tea for you." Lily reached eagerly. "Thank you." Ben took the cup with both hands, grateful but confused. "You didn't have to do this. I wanted to," she said, then glanced toward the gala. "Most people here won't notice, and those who do won't mind. Her words were oddly certain. Lily curled into a chair, sipping cocoa and giggling softly at the tiny marshmallows, her cheeks flushed with warmth. For the first time that evening, she looked like a child again, not just a brave little girl surviving hard days. Ben watched her heart easing. He turned to the woman. "Who are you really?" But she only smiled and said, "Just someone who hates seeing a child cold in the rain." The music swelled behind them, laughter echoing like soft bells as Ben stood awkwardly near the edge of the glowing room holding Lily's tiny hand. She was warm now, smiling sleepy cocoa still sweet on her lips. The woman returned, still composed, still graceful. Over her arm was a folded coat-dry, heavy wool, and in her hand a pair of soft slippers. "You'll catch a cold walking back like that," she said softly, offering them. Ben hesitated. I can't accept all this. You've already done more than enough." She didn't push, just held his gaze, something kind flickering behind her eyes. "Then just the coat. It's temporary." He finally nodded, letting her wrap it around his shoulders. It smelled faintly of citrus and cedarwood, comforting, like warmth in a storm. She crouched to Lily's level, adjusting the hood of her raincoat. "You're very brave," she whispered, "and very loved." Then just as quickly she stood and handed Ben a simple cream-colored card. "In case you ever need a little more kindness," she said. He looked down. Embossed in elegant print, Isabella Chen. Nothing more. No title, no company, just a name. "Thank you," he said quietly, unsure how to say what he really felt. She only smiled. "Take care of each other." Then she turned, disappearing back into the glow of the gala like a scene closing behind the velvet curtains. And Ben stepped into the rain again, holding his daughter. Her laughter tucked safely under a borrowed coat, and a name that would linger in his pocket far longer than he expected. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, silver threads falling through the streetlights' glow. Ben walked quietly, Lily's soft breaths warming the crook of his neck. She had fallen asleep the moment he stepped outside, curled against him like she always had when the world felt too big. The borrowed coat hung over them both, shielding her from the chill. His shoes squished with every step, but for once he didn't mind the wet. His mind wasn't on the cold or the weight of the day. It circled back to her. The woman. Isabella Chen. He whispered the name like a question to the empty street. No last-minute pitch. No business card filled with numbers. Just that name and the warmth she left behind like a fingerprint on his life. Why would someone like her, elegant, clearly powerful, help someone like him? Ben looked down at Lily, peaceful in sleep, and realized something rare had happened. A kindness without reason. A moment out of place, yet perfectly timed. He didn't know who Isabella Chen truly was, but he had a feeling this wasn't the last time he'd hear her name. Monday hit like a fast train. Ben hustled into the school cafetorium just after dawn, steam already rising from the industrial dishwasher. The clatter of trays and the sharp smell of disinfectant filled the air. He wiped his hands on his apron, barely catching his breath before the breakfast rush. Across town, Lily was at daycare clutching her bunny and a chocolate muffin from the corner store. He'd kissed her forehead and whispered a promise. "We'll be there on time today." By mid-morning, the teasing started. "Hey, Ben." One custodian grinned, elbowing him as he mopped. "Got any more mystery women showing up in the rain?" "Maybe she was an angel," joked another. "Here to rescue poor, soaked janitors." Ben smiled it off, chuckling politely. But in his pocket, folded like a secret, was the card. At lunch, he slipped outside behind the kitchen where steam vents hummed and no one bothered him. He pulled it out again. Smooth cardstock, simple lettering, Isabella Chen, underneath a number. Nothing else. He ran a thumb over the edge, hesitated, then slid it back into his wallet. Whatever storm she came from, it had passed. He couldn't afford distractions. But something inside him whispered, "She didn't give you that card for no reason." Ben straightened his collar for the 5th time. The school had invited all parents to a special partnership event, Something about local donors and education. He almost didn't come. The atrium was too polished, the people too well dressed. His boots squeaked on the marble floor. Lily, in her best polka dot dress, clung to his hand with wide-eyed wonder. "Daddy, it's like a castle." He smiled. "Maybe, just don't touch anything gold." They found seats in the back, light filtered through skylights above. A string quartet played softly near a stage. Then a hush fell. A woman stepped into the spotlight, calm poised, wrapped in soft blue silk. Ben froze. It was her, Isabella Chen. No coat this time, no umbrella. Just confidence and kindness wrapped in elegance. She spoke clearly about her nonprofit, about providing safe, creative spaces for children. Her passion was steady, sincere. And then her eyes found him. Just for a moment, a quiet recognition, a nod, as if to say, "I remember you." "I meant it." Ben's heart beat faster. Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, that's the umbrella lady." He smiled but said nothing. The storm had passed, but somehow its warmth remained. The crowd began to thin. Applause still echoed faintly in the grand atrium as parents filtered toward the refreshments. Teachers mingled with donors, and soft music resumed under the high ceiling. Ben stood awkwardly by the folding chairs, unsure if he should leave or linger. Lily spun in her dress beside him, trying to imitate a ballerina she had seen on a flyer earlier. Then he heard the soft click of heels approaching. "Ben, right." He turned. Isabella stood a few steps away, her expression warm but unreadable. "I'm glad you stayed for the whole talk." He nodded, feeling suddenly underdressed in his worn jacket. "We wouldn't have missed it. Lily loves anything with bright lights and pretty music." "Ah," Isabella smiled, looking at the little girl now twirling. "I think I was like that once. I used to press my face against the glass outside dance studios." Ben chuckled. "She wants ballet lessons, but, well, rent and groceries dance first." Isabella didn't flinch. Her eyes softened. "She's lucky to have you, a father who shows up in the rain and still makes her smile." Ben hesitated. "I didn't expect to see you again. I didn't expect you to stay on my mind," she replied gently. He looked at her, unsure what to say to that. He was a janitor, a single dad. She was whatever this was, polished, poised, powerful. And yet here she was crouching slightly to speak to Lily about tutus and fairy wings. "I used to dream of stages," Isabella said softly. "Now I just try to build them for others." Ben swallowed. "And I just try to keep the lights on." Their eyes met again. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't pity. It was something else. Recognition, quiet respect, and the kind of connection that doesn't need to be rushed. Ben was wiping down the last of the lunch tables when the double doors creaked open. He didn't look up at first. Parents sometimes wandered in early to pick up kids or ask directions. But the silence that followed the footsteps made him glance up. Isabella Chen, again. She wasn't wearing heels this time. Just simple flats, dark jeans, and a soft sweater tucked into a blazer. Less gala, more present. Ben blinked, still holding the damp cloth. "You're a long way from galas and fundraisers." She smiled, walking in without hesitation. "I like to visit the places our grants are supposed to help. See the people behind the applications." He motioned toward the chaos of half-stacked chairs and sticky tiles. "Well, welcome to the front lines." She looked around with amusement. "Smells like chicken nuggets and hard work." He chuckled, unsure where this was going. Then she spoke gently. "Ben, I wanted to talk about something in my nonprofit Bright Futures initiative. We're building a new branch focused on real community voices. We're tired of just handing out surveys. We want someone who's lived it, someone who knows what it's like to juggle a job, rent, and bedtime stories. Someone like you." Ben stared. "You want to hire me?" "Consult with us," she clarified. "Flexible hours paid fairly. You'd still work here if you choose, but you'd have a voice at the table. the kind that actually matters. His first instinct was to shake his head. I'm not a clean floors. I'm not a boardroom guy. Isabella didn't flinch. That's exactly why we need you. He hesitated, caught between disbelief and a flicker of something unfamiliar. Hope. I wouldn't know what to say in meetings. You said plenty outside that gala, just by standing there in the rain with your daughter. Her words sat in the air, warm and humbling. Ben glanced down at his hands, rough, callous, still clutching the cloth. Let me think about it. She nodded. Of course. No pressure. Then she turned, walking slowly toward the doors again, pausing before leaving. By the way, she added with a half smile, I brought extra marshmallows, in case Lily's still into those. The elevator chimed softly as it opened into a sunlit office space that looked more like a children's playroom than the headquarters of a major nonprofit. Pastel walls, watercolor art, cozy couches. Not a single stiff-backed chair in sight. Ben stepped in cautiously, holding Lily's hand. She looked around wide-eyed, her little sneakers squeaking on the polished floors. Isabella was waiting at the center of the room, her expression warm but unreadable. Hey, she said, setting down 2 mugs, one clearly meant for Ben, the other filled with warm milk and a marshmallow floating lazily on top. Wow, Lily whispered, tugging on her dad's sleeve. Is this a castle? Ben chuckled softly. Feels like one. Isabella knelt to Lily's level. Do you like to dance? Lily nodded shyly. Isabella reached behind a nearby armchair and pulled out a soft box wrapped in tissue. I used to twirl all over the house when I was your age. My mom saved this. Maybe you can make it dance again. Lily opened the box, gasping. A pale pink tutu, delicate but well kept. And under itney ballet slippers, a wooden jewelry box that chimed when she twisted the crank, and a few well-loved stuffed animals with ribbon bows. For me, she asked, eyes wide. For you, Isabella said gently. No strings. Ben stood still, unsure of what to say. Gratitude lodged in his chest like a stone. You didn't have to. I know, Isabella said, standing again. But I wanted to. You remind me of someone, or maybe of who I used to wish would show up for me. They stood there for a moment, the air between them soft with memory. Ben took a deep breath. I haven't said yes yet. To your offer. I know, she replied. This isn't part of that. It feels like déjà vu, he murmured. You showing up. A coat in the rain. Coffee. Now this. She smiled. Maybe life just circles back when it needs to. Ben stood in the corner of the studio, his arms crossed awkwardly as a dozen little girls twirled and skipped across the polished wooden floor. Lily was in the front row, her borrowed pink tutu slightly too big at the waist but perfect in every other way. Her face glowed with a glow Ben hadn't seen in a long time, not just happiness, but something brighter. Freedom. The other parents sat with their lattes and fancy coats chatting softly about his school programs and vacation plans. Ben felt out of place in his faded work shirt and scuffed boots. Still, he smiled every time Lily looked back at him with that radiant, "Are you seeing this, Daddy?" expression. He had scraped together enough to cover the first class, telling the receptionist they'd figure out the rest in a week or 2. But when he stepped forward to officially register Lily, the woman at the front desk blinked and said, "Oh, there's no balance due. Someone covered the entire semester. Paid in full." Ben froze. What? The receptionist smiled. It was marked as anonymous. Just said to make sure Lily Parker dances. A name. A first name and a last. Ben stepped back stunned. He didn't need to guess. Outside the studio, he found a quiet bench and sat down watching the raindrops begin to fall on the sidewalk again, just like the night they met. He pulled out his phone thumb, hovering over Isabella's contact. He didn't call. Instead, he looked back through the glass windows at Lily spinning in her oversized ballet shoes full of light. Accepting kindness wasn't easy, not when life had taught him to do it all alone. But maybe, just maybe, some people showed up not to take anything away, but to give something back. He whispered a quiet thank you, though no one could hear, and somewhere across town, Isabella smiled without knowing why. The first headline came through a coworker's phone during lunch. CEO accused of favoritism, nonprofit faces questions over private sponsorships. Ben read the headline over his shoulder, heart pounding. He saw Isabella's photo below it, poised, elegant, unsmiling. The article outlined how she had personally funded several children's extracurriculars, bypassing standard board protocols. One name wasn't mentioned, but the implications were clear. At home that night, Ben sat at the kitchen table with Lily's ballet shoes in his hands. She was humming in the next room, twirling around with blissful ignorance. The joy in her voice felt fragile now, borrowed. He opened his phone, stared at Isabella's number again. Was this all charity? A pity project, a storm brewed in his chest, gratitude battling with pride, hope tangled with shame. He thought about the card she gave him that night in the rain, not as a benefactor, but as a human being. She hadn't flaunted her title. She never even asked for recognition. But now the world had noticed. And part of him hated the idea that maybe, just maybe, he had made things harder for her by accepting what he thought was kindness. He didn't call her. He just sat in the silence watching the rain tap the window, wondering if he'd let Lily down by stepping into a world they didn't belong in. And across the city, Isabella sat in a boardroom filled with cold glares and stiff voices defending her choices with calm words and a silent ache no one saw. Ben didn't reply to Isabella's last message. It had been polite, kind of even just checking in. Lily looked so happy. No pressure on anything, I promise. But something inside him twisted every time her name lit up his screen. He left it unread, though he'd memorized every word. At work, he focused on scrubbing tables and fixing jammed cafeteria trays, staying late when he didn't have to. His coworkers joked less now. Some had seen the news, some hadn't. But a few sideways glances told him enough. He or she was the man who got lucky. The janitor with a rich friend. At Lily's ballet class, he lingered near the back wall, arms crossed, trying not to make eye contact with the receptionist. He'd found out Isabella had paid for more than the enrollment fee, uniform, shoes, even snacks for the week. He should have been grateful, but instead he felt exposed, as if every little kindness was a receipt for something he never meant to owe. Meanwhile, Isabella sat across from her board of directors, lips pressed tight. Favoritism undermines trust, one of them said. Even if the intentions are good, Isabella. I'm not asking for approval, she said quietly. I used my personal funds. That doesn't change a perception, the chairman replied. You're the face of this organization. You know that? Her hands curled slightly in her lap. So if I help one child, one father, I'm reckless. A pause. You're emotional. That word stung more than it should have. Back at the school, the superintendent dropped by the cafeteria to hand Ben a glossy envelope. It was an official invitation and open offer to join Isabella's outreach team. Part-time to start. Flexible. Fair pay. Ben stared at it for a long time before slipping it into his locker unopened. Because even with the rain long gone, the weight of being someone else's good deed was still soaking through his bones. The lights dimmed inside the modest auditorium, and the audience hushed. Soft piano music began as children, tiny and trembling in their pastel tutus, tiptoed onto the stage. Ben stood just behind the curtain, hands, clammy heart thudding. He wasn't the one performing, but watching Lily in her little lavender costume, clutch her partner's hand made him feel like he was walking a tightrope. She caught sight of him and gave a tiny wave. He smiled, tried not to cry. Backstage smelled of sweat and hairspray, but for a moment none of it mattered. His daughter was about to dance after everything, and she belonged here. As the duet began, soft and careful, Ben turned toward the back of the theater just in time to see someone step through the door. Isabella. She wore a gray coat, simple but elegant. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot. No one turned to look. She didn't want them to. She slipped into an empty seat near the bus, hands folded in her lap, eyes only on the stage. For the next 4 minutes, she didn't blink. Ben saw it all from his hidden corner, the way her smile came slowly like sunlight through fog. The way she leaned forward ever so slightly when Lily nailed her spin. The quiet clap when the music ended. She didn't try to wave, didn't call attention. She was just there, present, steady, silent. When the show ended and the children filed out to thunderous applause, Isabella was already slipping back into the aisle. Before she left, she turned toward the stage curtain toward him. Their eyes met for the first time in weeks. She gave him a soft, small smile. Not one of pity, not charity, just pride. Then she walked into the rain. Ben watched her through the glass doors as she lifted her umbrella and disappeared down the street, her silhouette blurring under the drizzle. His throat tightened, but this time not from confusion or pride, from something warmer. Something he hadn't dared admit until now. Gratitude, and maybe something more. Ben stood at the edge of the ballroom feeling entirely out of place. Glittering gowns, polished shoes, and people who'd never worried about paying for daycare. He just wanted to help behind the scenes, not be in the spotlight. But then Isabella stepped on stage. And tonight she said, voice clear and calm, I want to introduce someone who reminds us what quiet resilience looks like. Ben froze. She was talking about him. The spotlight hit. Applause followed. And before he knew it, he was on the stage, heart pounding. I'm just a janitor, he began, a voice low. But someone once invited me in from the rain. She didn't know me. She just saw a dad trying. He glanced at Lily in the crowd, beaming in her little dress, and then at Isabella. Thanks to her, my daughter dances now. And I believe again. Silence, then thunderous applause. Backstage, Isabella touched his arm gently. You belong here, she whispered. And somehow for the first time, Ben believed her. The microphone felt heavy in Ben's hands. Lights beamed down like judgment. Laughter and clinking glasses echoed. He stood center stage, but all he wanted was to disappear. His throat tightened. Words caught. Why had he agreed to this then movement? From the crowd, Lily waved. Just a tiny hand, but it cut through the pressure like sunlight through fog. Beside her, Isabella gave a nod, calm, steady. Ben took a breath. I don't belong here, he admitted aloud. At least I thought I didn't. A pause. The room held still. But someone believed in me. Believed that even janitors have stories that matter. That fathers who try even in the rain deserve a chance. The crowd remained quiet but no longer cold. When he stepped off the stage, Isabella met him with a soft smile. No words, just a look that said, you did it. And for once, Ben didn't feel small. He felt seen. As the applause faded and Ben stepped away from the microphone, he felt his heartbeat still pounding in his ears. He hadn't meant to say so much. He hadn't meant to be so seen. Then Isabella came to his side. She didn't smile, didn't applaud. She just leaned close enough that only he could hear and whispered, you can. Ben froze. Those words, you can, in his mother's tongue, in the exact tone she used when he was small and scared and soaking in rainwater on the edge of failure. His eyes met hers. You speak Vietnamese. Her voice caught as she straightened, glancing briefly at the stunned audience. Just a little. Enough to remember what my father once told me when I wanted to give up. She turned toward the crowd, voice rising, not loud but trembling with something deeper. I grew up not far from here, in a small apartment with big dreams and no room to breathe. But I had a father who told me Concethi, and so I did. The room was silent now. Every fork, every glass, every breath held, still. She turned back to Ben. It's why I noticed you. Why I helped. Not because you needed saving, but because you reminded me of the kind of courage I came from. The silence didn't break. It melted. And in that moment, everything shifted, not just for Ben, but for everyone watching. The event ended in a standing ovation, but the next morning brought headlines. CEO breaks protocol for janitor turned speaker. Favoritism or faith behind closed doors. Isabella faced the board. Stern faces, folded arms. The same old question, is he worth the risk? She didn't flinch. He's not a risk. That's what this program was made for. Meanwhile, Ben waited outside. He wasn't meant to be there, but something in him, maybe pride, maybe love, refused to let her stand alone. When the door opened, he stepped in. "I'm not a prop in some feel-good story," he said, voice steady. "I mop floors, I raised my kid, and I didn't ask for any of this. But I also didn't walk away when it rained." He looked at Isabella. "She didn't help me because I was weak. She helped because she saw someone worth believing in." Silence. Then an older board member leaned back, eyes softer now. "Maybe that's what leadership looks like." Isabella didn't smile. She just reached for Ben's hand beneath the table quietly. Gratefully. Two hearts now fully on the line. The atrium was empty, its glass ceiling dark above them, save for faint reflections of city lights. Water trickled from the stone fountain where Lily once danced around with a paper crown. Ben sat on the edge, hands clasped. Isabella approached quietly, heels clicking against marble, then stopping. Neither spoke until she finally whispered, "I didn't do all this for gratitude." "I know," Ben replied, still not looking at her. "And I didn't show up tonight to be a hero." A long pause. "I've spent so long surviving, I forgot what it felt like to just breathe," he added. "And when you helped me that night in the rain, I didn't know how to let that in." She sat beside him, close but not touching. "I've built everything I thought I wanted, but that night handing you a coat felt more real than any speech I've given." He turned to her. Her eyes were tired, vulnerable, real. "No promises," she said softly. "Just this moment." Ben nodded, and there in the stillness, before dawn, two hearts, once strangers in a storm, shared the most honest silence they'd ever known. The polished boardroom reeked of tension, leather chairs, shar suits, colder stares. Isabella sat at the head, composed but pale. A man read from a report, each word slicing the air. Misuse of discretionary funds, preferential treatment, breach of neutrality. She didn't flinch. Someone demanded, "Why him?" Isabella, of all people. Ben stood outside the glass wall, unseen, but hearing every word. "She bent rules for a janitor with a daughter," a woman sneered. "She saw people," another said softer, but was drowned out. By the time the motion passed, temporary suspension pending investigation, Isabella rose calmly. "I'll comply. But I want to apologize for seeing humanity where you see headlines." Outside, she found Ben waiting. "You heard," she said. "I did," he nodded. "I'm still here." She blinked once, quiet relief behind eyes that had held too much for too long. And for the first time, she let him walk beside her, not behind. Lily's forehead burned like fire. Her tiny hands clutched Ben's shirt as he held her through the night, listening to shallow breaths and fighting his own fear. The hearing was today, but he couldn't leave. Not when she needed him most. He turned off his phone, cradling her closer. "It's okay, sweet pea. Daddy's here." Across the city, Isabella faced an empty chair where Ben should have sat. She checked her phone. No word. Then an hour later, a message came, not from Ben, but from the daycare nurse. "Lily has a high fever. Father stayed home." Without hesitation, Isabella left the hearing. No chauffeur, no umbrella, just her and the freezing rain. She arrived, soaked hair clinging to her face, clutching a plastic bag with soup, ginger tea, and a worn stuffed rabbit from her own childhood. Ben opened the door, stunned. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, stepping in, rainwater dripping onto the floor. "But I wanted to." He watched as she sat beside Lily's bed, whispering stories while stroking the girl's damp hair. And in that quiet room filled with steam and worry and something unspoken, Ben saw not a CEO or a scandal, but a woman with a heart wide enough for two. The boardroom felt colder than usual. Isabella stood at the center, eyes calm but tired. This time she wasn't alone. Ben walked in, shirt pressed, hands steady, voice shaking only once. "I'm not here because she saved us," he said. "I'm here because she saw us. My daughter wasn't a case file. She was a little girl standing in the rain." He paused, meeting the eyes of the board members, and Isabella didn't ask for thanks. She gave quietly, humbly. That's not favoritism. That's humanity. There was a long silence. Then Isabella stepped forward, voice firm. If helping one child with honesty is grounds for punishment, then perhaps I'm in the wrong room. Somewhere in the back, someone clapped. Then another. The chairman leaned forward. Miss Chen, you may stay, on the condition your methods remain transparent. Isabella didn't smile. She turned to Ben instead, just a glance. But in it was everything gratitude, relief, and the beginning of something unspoken. The turning point wasn't the testimony. It was the man beside her. Applause echoed before Isabella even stepped on stage. But it wasn't for her. It was for Ben. He stood beside the new Outreach banner-creased shirt, nervous hands, and the proudest smile he'd worn in years. Lily sat in the front row tutu, peeking out beneath her coat, clapping with all her might. The board chair cleared his throat and spoke first. We made a mistake, he admitted, not in helping but in doubting the heart behind it. He turned to Isabella. You are reinstated, not despite what you did, but because of it. The room erupted. Isabella's eyes glistened, but she kept her gaze on Ben. He nodded once. Quiet, steady. When Ben was invited to speak, he walked up slowly, cleared his throat, then surprised everyone. He didn't talk about policies. He talked about chocolate, cake, soaked jackets, and the moment a stranger offered him and his daughter a dry place to stand. She didn't change our lives with money, he finished. She changed them by seeing us. And as the crowd stood in ovation, Isabella looked down at Lily, who was smiling up at Ben like he'd hung the stars himself. In that moment, it wasn't the board, the charity, or the rules that mattered. It was the heart. And the heart had won. Applause echoed before Isabella even stepped on stage. But it wasn't for her. It was for Ben. He stood beside the new Outreach banner, creased shirt, nervous hands, and the proudest smile he'd worn in years. Lily sat in the front row, tutu peeking out beneath her coat, clapping with all her might. The board chair cleared his throat and spoke first. We made a mistake, he admitted, not in helping but in doubting the heart behind it. He turned to Isabella. You are reinstated, not despite what you did, but because of it. The room erupted. Isabella's eyes glistened, but she kept her gaze on Ben. He nodded once, quiet, steady. When Ben was invited to speak, he walked up slowly, cleared his throat, then surprised everyone. He didn't talk about policies. He talked about chocolate cake soaked jackets, and the moment a stranger offered him and his daughter a dry place to stand. She didn't change our lives with money, he finished. She changed them by seeing us. And as the crowd stood in ovation, Isabella looked down at Lily, who was smiling up at Ben like he'd hung the stars himself. In that moment, it wasn't the board, the charity, or the rules that mattered. It was the heart. And the heart had won. The recital hall lights dimmed as they stepped outside into a soft drizzle that blurred the city lights. Ben adjusted his coat over Lily, fast asleep in her stroller, cheeks flushed from the excitement. Isabella held an umbrella in one hand, a half-melted cone of vanilla in the other. Still like rain? She asked, nudging his arm. He grinned. Only when it ends like this. They walked slowly, the world quiet except for the tap of raindrops and the creak of stroller wheels. At a corner, they paused beneath an awning, sharing a second cone chocolate this time. Lily's favorite, too. You ever think about how strange it all is, he asked. That a soaked jacket and some leftover cake lettuce here, Isabella looked at him, then up at the rain. I think it's the first time the rain didn't feel heavy. They laughed, gently like two people still healing but no longer alone. And there, with the scent of wet pavement and the taste of shared sweetness, something quiet and steady settled between them. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of something that could hold in the storm. The office was quiet when Ben walked in. Lily's hand in his, her tutu peeking out beneath her coat. Isabella stood by the window, sunlight brushing her shoulder. She turned smiling, not like a CEO, but like someone who'd waited for this moment. I want to ask you something. She began, her voice steady but soft. Not as a favor, not out of gratitude, but because I believe in you. She slid a folder across the table. His name was on the first page, Ben Tran Community Advisor, Future Path Foundation. You'd be helping shape real programs. Helping families. Like yours. Like mine used to be. Ben stared at the folder, then at her. You trust me that much? She stepped closer. I do. And maybe this isn't just a job. Maybe it's the beginning of something we build together. Something lasting. He looked at Lily at the dance shoes peeking from her backpack. Then at Isabella, steady, kind, brave. I'm not a man used to being asked, he said, voice catching, but yes. Humbly, yes. Her eyes shimmered. No grand kiss, no dramatic moment. Just two people, weathered by life, choosing to walk forward side by side. Forever starting with yes. The apartment was dim, the only light coming from the soft glow of Lily's nightlight. She lay curled beneath her blankets, breathing steady, her little hand wrapped around a stuffed ballerina. Isabella sat beside her, fingers gently combing through damp strands of hair. She hummed something soft, something not meant to be heard, only felt. Ben leaned in the doorway, watching quietly. A scene he'd never imagined, peaceful, whole. When Isabella stood, he didn't speak. He just reached for her hand. She looked up surprised, but didn't pull away. Fingers intertwined, they stood in silence beside the girl who had unknowingly brought them together. No confession, no grand promises, only the hush of a room where love didn't need to be spoken. It simply was. 1 year later, the auditorium echoed with soft music and proud applause. Lily stood on stage in a white tutu, cheeks pink with joy. She bowed deeply, graceful, radiant. In the crowd, Ben wore a suit that didn't quite fit, but his smile did. Isabella sat beside him, her hand quietly resting over his. There were no flash bulbs, no gala gowns, just rows of families clapping for small dreams made real. By the exit hung a simple plaque. Rain or shine, strength comes from kindness. Ben paused to read it. Isabella smiled. Lily tugged their hands. Can we get cake together? They stepped outside. Hand in hand, Lily skipping between them, giggling under a wide summer sky. No headlines, no drama, just a future built from quiet moments, chosen hearts, and love that had weathered the rain.